It's the 19th of December and it's time for the 19th film in my 24 Ghost Stories for Christmas. I've been really looking forward to talking about this film because it comes from my favourite director, John Carpenter. We're talking about the 1980 release of The Fog, coming on the back of Halloween, which up until that point was the most successful independent film of all time. Carpenter was given still a relatively low budget of around $1 million to shoot this small town ghost story. Carpenter had based the film on an experience that himself and his producer and co-writer Deborah Hill had when they were visiting Stonehenge, where they saw this ghostly fog coming in, and they started talking about how that would be a great setting for a sort of modern day ghost story. The plot is about a town called Antonio Bay, which is about to celebrate its centenary year. At the same time, a bunch of different people from around the town start experiencing strange and weird and wonderful occurrences. Things start moving on their own. Clocks seem to smash. We've got lights flicking on and off, and a whole bunch of things which you normally would maybe think of as sort of poltergeist activity happen. At the same time, a fog comes in from the sea, and a local boat crew are murdered in a rather gory fashion by seemingly supernatural um, creatures that are within the fog. The next night is the actual 100th anniversary of the creation of Antonio Bay, the town, and the fog this time rolls right in to the town. And wherever the fog goes, these sort of these sort of ghost-like figures come out of the fog and start executing people from around the town. We then get given the backstory, which is that there's an element of revenge. I don't want to ruin it for anyone that's not actually watched the film, but there's an element of revenge in there, and that's essentially what it is. It's a revenge story, which most ghost stories, well, a great many ghost stories are. What's great about The Fog is that it feels quite like a monster flick as well in places. It is a ghost story, but you have the very physical um, manifestation of those ghosts. There's also the argument to be made that the fog strays into very slightly, cautiously into the zombie genre. I've always loved the fog. It was the film which made me first, I think, of John Carpenter as a director, and you know, everyone talks about Halloween, everyone talks about The Thing, a lot of people talk about Escape from New York, but I think The Fog really gets overlooked. What's interesting about the film is that initially there was an initial cut of the film which Carpenter was really upset about because he realised that for him the film didn't work. Rumour has it that the film was much slower paced and that the supernatural aspects of the film didn't really come into play until the final act. So we were sort of seeing this small town go about its business, building up the mystery of the background of the town, where the town comes from, and then these vengeful ghosts that are linked to that backstory would come in. I think that's a really interesting idea, but Carpenter felt that it just didn't work. So he went and he shot around about a third of the film, reshot about a third of the film, put in a lot more sort of maybe, I suppose you would say, gory sort of scenes, um, and shot an opening scene with John Houseman as he tells the story of Antonio Bay at the beginning around a campfire with a bunch of children, which is really reminiscent. If you look at the Wikipedia article, it points this out. It's really reminiscent of the film Ghost Story from 1981, which I mentioned, but that came after, if you know what I mean. But it seems like a very, very similar setup. And you wonder if the makers of Ghost Story had actually watched The Fog and thought of John Houseman and brought him in to do that. Um, Carpenter's stated himself that it's not his favourite film out of the films he's made, but in his words, he sees it as a minor modern ghost story classic. So he doesn't see it as a great film, but he sees it as a pretty strong film. Um, I actually disagree. I think it's a very strong film. I think it deserves much more attention than it has actually got. And the one of the things I love about it is it's an ensemble piece, and it's a true ensemble piece because it jumps around these different people around, and all of the actors and actresses are phenomenal. You've got Jamie Lee Curtis, you've got her mother Janet Leigh, who's in the film as well. Janet Leigh, famous from the shower scene in Psycho. Tom Atkins, who is fantastic. We also saw in things like Creepshow and Escape from New York, Night of the Creeps. Hal Holbrook, who's just an incredible actor. Again, he was in Creepshow as well, actually, but in many ways, he's kind of the heart of the film. And there are even actors and actresses who have roles from that they were actually in previous Carpenter films, like Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween. So the cast is really great, and I should mention as well Adrienne Barbeau, who is just wonderful in this film. Um, she plays this sort of radio DJ who's out in this lonely little lighthouse, and she's broadcasting where the fog's going and try to help people get away from the fog. Um, she's really on fire in this film. She's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I think it's Carpenter has stated his dislike for films like The Haunting, something which I completely disagree with him about. But he really thinks that you should show what you have threatened to show. You should actually show it, and he does a good job of having that balance. He does the image of the figures in the fog. They are they're really striking, and I think it is creepy. I always remember having an experience when I was a kid, standing in the fog and seeing people. It was a really thick fog that came into Glasgow. I'm having deja vu now, and I'm wondering if I've actually done a video on the fog. Maybe I have. Maybe I've already mentioned it before, but it's in this list anyway. All right. Um, and yeah, it's one of those films that just has always stuck with me since the 1980s. The score that Carpenter has written for the film, while slightly reminiscent of Tubular Bells, is excellent. It's fantastic. I think the main theme's called Blake's Revenge or something like that, so go and check that out. It's wonderful. Um, and the film's just, typical Carpenter, anamorphic, 235, um, just wonderful composition of shots, which is always really surprises me because from what I know of Carpenter, with the exception of a few scenes in his films, he doesn't storyboard. He just goes in and sets his camera up and goes with it, So it's always really impressive. So that's The Fog. I would absolutely, highly recommend it. If you watched it years ago and you weren't that impressed with it, please go back and watch it again. And I've still yet to watch the 2005 remake, but I hear it's awful. Anyway, so that's the 19th entry, my 24 Ghost Stories for Christmas. As you can probably tell, I'm struggling with a sore throat. So hopefully I'll be back tomorrow with the 20th entry in my series of ghost stories, and I hope you're all having a good festive season, and I'll see you all soon.